Hello everyone, Mancini here. So today I'm doing something kind of a different video than I normally do. I am showing you how to convert this particular TP-Link Archer C900 router from using the TP-Link firmware to Openwrt. Now you might be asking, why am I doing this? So I don't know. I guess a year or two ago, I was in a bind and I needed a wireless access point, so I bought this C900 router. Um, it's funny because it supports some pretty nice features, right? It's a AC900 model, supports 450 megabits of 5G for wireless AC router, and has a gigabit switch. And so those specs are pretty good. The range was great and all that. What's disappointing uh, is the lack of support that TP-Link put into this model. I'm assuming that TP-Link looked at it as I guess a lower end model or something, but it performed very well, and so I found it a shame that there was no software updates or anything that went to it. And I thought, maybe I can load OpenWRT and play around with it. Maybe turn it into, a wireless, sniffer, or anything to have in my lab. So when digging, found out that DDWRT and OpenWRT do not support it. That was until I came across a GitHub repo by someone claiming that they were able to flash OpenWRT by a pretty ingenious method. Well, what they did was they decrypted a backup file that you get from the router's backup little gadget, or sorry, the backup routine, right? So you can go in and say backup my configuration. You decrypt that because normally that's a binary file that comes encrypted. So we decompile that, and inside there you'll find typically a configuration file that's either in JSON or XML or something like that. And it turns out that the TP-Link product line for this C900 runs OpenWRT under the hood, aka BusyBox. So there's just a configuration that disables the SSH daemon from allowing remote access. So what do? We go in, modify the configuration, allow access to BusyBox, and then we can flash OpenWRT onto the box. So I thought, okay, let's try it out, and let's do it together. So I've already gone ahead, like the instructions are pretty simple here. So I've already gone ahead and downloaded pretty much everything we need. Okay, so I've just come and cloned this repository into my temporary directory. Okay, and I will come here, and so I'll need, as per the site, or sorry, as per the directions, we're going to need the original firmware. Okay, and so I'm on the TP-Link site. I'll include the links in the description of the video. Okay, so firmware. Now this is where I get really ticked off at the vendors. So this is an end of life product. I get it, but at one time it was not end of life, and TP-Link published exactly one firmware for this device, and it was the release firmware. There's been no update. So this router, which can still support even today's today's internet speeds, and supports AC, so it supports many devices. It's been sitting there since 2016 without any firmware updates at all, and so we have pretty much a security issue across the net with home routers being compromised and being part of DDoS attacks and all sorts of things. And if this router has some sort of security vulnerability, well, you as a consumer have no option to protect yourself, because if TP-Link doesn't come up with a firmware, you're done. So this is why I like third-party firmware projects like DDWRT, like Openwrt, like Tomato, because they continue patches. They have, latest Linux kernels if the hardware supports it. And in this case, it does support it. It's just being crippled by the fact that it's not open. You have to hack around to get a third-party software on here to continue getting support. So even if you're not hacking around with it, even to do this just to get updated software to protect the security of your network and the functionality of the box, I think it's worth it. Okay, so you download, so back to what we're doing here. So you have to download the original firmware. So done. Okay, and then we'll have to download the Openwrt snapshot. We'll get to that actually in a second. Okay, so we'll have to first, now that we have that firmware, we have to run a dd command that adjusts the bin, the offset of that bin. Okay. So we're going to do that like so. And while that's done, after it's done, we're going to extract the firmware files here. So I'll just give it a moment to do its thing. Okay. All right. So, I had already done it, but you get the picture. This is the command, squashfs.root. So this squashfs root is the actual. These are the files of the firmware that gets loaded onto the router. So if we go www, these are the actual website files. Okay. So let me just remove this data directory here, and you'll see why in a moment. Now that we have that done, okay, we need 2 encryption keys. Okay, from the squashfs. Okay, so they're in bytecode, so you can just do strings, and you're going to see these 2 encryption keys, which I already have. Okay, and quick note is that because there's only ever been one firmware, I can almost guarantee that you're going to see the exact 2 string keys anyways. Okay, so now that we have that, we take those 2 keys and you will see a hidden file. Okay, so it will be .encryption_params.sample. So you will rename that file to encryption.params. Okay. And you'll put the 2 keys there. So the longer key is the export key, so that goes on the top. And the shorter one, the IV key, goes at the bottom. So you're going to save this file. Okay. So next is essentially just running the extract script, which is going to extract that configuration file. So let the script run. A new directory called data will show up. And as you can see, config.xml is there. So what is config.xml? So in config.xml is the configuration that is flashed onto the router. Okay, so what we're looking for is a section called dropbear. Okay, so let's search it a couple times. Okay. So dropbear. Okay, so we can see here that dropbear is configured for port 22 password on, but it does not allow remote access. Okay, so we need to change that. So what we do is add this portion to the config file, remote SSH, okay, on. Okay, so allow that. Now that we have remote SSH on, that's all we need. Hit package.sh. So once you do that, it repackages the file and you'll have a new file created called backup_final.bin. Okay, so I already have a copy of this on my desktop. Okay, so what you're going to do with that new file that you have is go over to the router. Okay, as I said before, this is a brand new router, right? Not even configured for the first time. It's asking me all the beginning questions. So I'm just going to exit that. I'm going to go over to advanced, system tools, backup and restore. Now I'm going to go to the restore section, find that backup_bin, backup_final.bin, and I'm going to restore that onto the router. So what this is going to do is copy that configuration back onto the router, but it's also going to see that configuration to enable dropbear to allow remote connections. Okay, and then this is where the magic starts to happen. So once that happens there, we'll just wait for the router. The router will reboot, so this will take a moment or so. Okay, the very first boot I notice after a restore takes a bit, but then subsequent reboots are fine. Also, when we flash Openwrt, the first boot takes about a moment or so more, and then subsequent reboots and boot ups are just fine. Okay, so this should start responding now. Now, what happens if we SSH into it? Okay. So first of all, the SSH, I had done this before, so that key is there. Now it's actually root at, yes. Oh, it's asking for a password. I will put in password here. It's the default admin, and oh, we are in BusyBox on the TP-Link router. Now, if you just want to play around inside the guts of the router and pretty much leave this, see, the benefit of this right now is that although it's an old version of BusyBox, if I'm sorry to be bouncing around, let me go to the benefit of this is that you still have the TP-Link GUI if you want to keep it, and you have access to the underlying OS. The downfall is that there's no package manager, so OPKG is not there. If you're familiar with Openwrt, OPKG is how you install packages. So if you want to install like a TCP dump, you want to install like wireless sniffing tools and stuff like that, you can't do that. So this is where you might want to flash Openwrt. Now the base install, which I'm going to show you here, does not come with a GUI. I would suggest looking at Openwrt Luci. It's just a matter of OPKG install Luci, and that would require internet access. So you'd have to set up an IP and a static route for your gateway to maybe access through your internet now, or connect your modem and set it up for DHCP. But there are tons of videos on how to do that online for Openwrt. Okay, so let's assume that we do want the full blown Openwrt in the latest version. Well, how do we do that? Very, very simple. We're going to the flashing section of the guide here. And what we're going to do is you're going to cat over the Openwrt generic sysupgrade.bin. Okay, this is very important. Sysupgrade.bin, do not get the kernel or the factory one. You will brick your router, and then you have to go through the debricking procedure. So it can get murky. So ensure that it's sysupgrade.bin. I will include the direct link to this specific image in the video description. Okay. So now that we have this, oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay. Let me just fix this. Okay, so now this is going to copy the TP-Link, it's going to copy the Openwrt generic image over to the TP-Link router's temporary directory. Okay, so again, the password's admin, wait a moment, it moves it over to the memory of the router. All right, so now that we're in, let's look at the partition. So proc mtd, and you see that we have 5 partitions: the factory, U-boot, kernel, and root. So we're going to be rewriting the kernel and the root FS in this process. Okay, so you can match it through the guide, but chances are it will match if we have the C900. Okay, I've also seen that layout in other TP-Link routers that I've flashed, like DDWRT and stuff on. So it's pretty common. I think it's their standard. Okay, so now what we're going to do is commit this to flash. Okay, so we're writing this to flash. Okay, and once this is complete, we'll have to reboot the router. Now, Openwrt's default IP space is 192.168.1.0/24, and the TP-Link was 0. So if you're assigning a static IP, which I normally do while I'm doing these things, you'll have to change that to 1. I also think that the default Openwrt image doesn't have DHCP enabled by default anyways, so you might not even get an IP through DHCP. Okay, so we're going to reboot the router. Just hit reboot at this stage. Go over to my wired configuration. Set the IP to 1.66 or whatever you want to set it to. Anything except .1. Okay. Now let's just wait for the router to boot up. Now, like I mentioned before, the first boot takes a little bit more time. Okay. So let's just wait for it to start responding. Okay, started to respond. Okay. Let me just clear this SSH key. And there we go. Openwrt on the TP-Link C900. There's no GUI, like I mentioned. However, OPKG is there. So it would just be a matter of OPKG update and OPKG install Luci. And it's gonna fail because I don't have internet access on this router yet, because you know I have to set the IPs and all that. But that's how you get started on installing the GUI and continue on. I hope this video helps someone who has the C900 and wants to do more with it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And as always, you can reach me at Sean@SeanMancini.com and on my website, SeanMancini.com. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.